Hey there, in this lecture we'll create a gorgeous 3D text effect that looks like it's made out of gold. Here's what you can expect to see at the end of this video, and the fun thing about it is it's still live text. That means you can replace this word with anything else and it will look just as nice. Start with a new canvas that's 1000 by 500 pixels. For my type, I'll write gold. This is going to be formatted as follows. The typeface is going to be Mollet, which can be downloaded for free from the attached link. I'll have it in all caps, about 300 pixels in size. I'll also increase its letter spacing to 60 so we'll get extra breathing room. Don't worry about the colour because we'll use a lot of layer styles on it. For now, I'll leave it black, but I'll centre it on my canvas both horizontally and vertically. Next, I'll convert it to a smart object. Let's enable a yellow colour overlay to kick things off. My colour code is FFEA00. Leave everything else as is. Now I'll add an inner glow to start creating a contour for my 3D look. For the colour, use EFDEC2. Set its opacity at 90%, but change the blend mode to linear burn. This will darken the outside of your text layer. The technique should be set at softer, with the source being the edge of our type. Currently nothing's showing up because we need to increase the choke to 45% and have the size set at 25 pixels. Now we're getting somewhere. These are all values that work with this particular size, so if you want to apply them somewhere else, you might want to scale them. The next effect takes our contour further. Activate an inner shadow and change the colour to D7AF72. You can leave the opacity at 100%, but you need to change the blend mode to normal. The angle I decided on using is 140 degrees without this global light option activated. Finally, for the sliders, I'll use 5, 15 and 20 for each of these fields respectively. I know it may not look like much at the moment, but here's the twist. We'll change this contour from its default value to Cove Shallow. This is something I played around with until I got an interesting result. Now it makes much more sense. Please note that if you click on this arrow, you won't get the same window you've just seen me go through. That's because you actually have to click here on this preview. Okay, we're almost done with this layer. Let's add a drop shadow. Pure black for the colour with an opacity of about 35%. Keep it at a 90-degree angle, but change the distance to 5. Finally, increase the size to 10 pixels. Good job! Now, this looks pretty boring, but next we'll add a lot of gloss to it. Duplicate this layer style, and now we'll start working on this top copy. Drop its fill at 0% and clear all these existing layer styles. Okay, now let's add a stroke. This is going to be set at 10 pixels inside my text with this code, FEDE00. Now I'll add a bevel and emboss, which will give us that nice solid look. Here are its settings. Use a stroke emboss with the technique set at chisel hard. The depth should be set at 125%. Direction is up with a size of 30 pixels, no softening whatsoever. So far, so good. The shading will completely transform our look, so let's have at it. 100 degrees for the angle, no global light. As for the altitude, 40 will work just fine. We'll change the contour to the second one in the list, but make sure you have anti-aliased checked. To finish off this effect, change the highlight to 75% opacity, but keep at its default settings. That means the blend mode is set to screen and the colour code is pure white, so FFF. For the shadow, we need a cream tone, so I went with CABB73. 75% opacity, but the blend mode should be changed to linear burn. This doesn't completely change the outcome, but if you try normal, you'll see the top part isn't as nice as it could be. Finally, we have a very complicated gradient that will create a gloss effect. You have this attached to the lecture, so if you double-click it, you'll immediately get it in your gradient library. Here it is. It basically creates some reflections based on white that fade away. It requires quite a few points, but you're better off using a pre-made one rather than creating it from scratch. Now I need to customize its settings. Experiment with the blend mode and see what works best for you. Normal might work well, but luminosity might be more flexible for future use. Enable Dither, which will ensure our gradient won't have any quality issues. Opacity is something you can fine-tune for yourself. Here I'll go with 50%. Set the angle at 55 degrees, but ramp up the scale to 150% to cover more of your text. Of course, if something isn't looking right, you can always adjust it. I think this reflection is one of the more important effects from this project, so take your time with it. Finally, I'll add one final copy of this layer to my canvas. I'll clear its layer styles and I'll position it at the bottom of my stack. Now I'll nudge it 3 or 4 pixels underneath everything. This is optional, by the way. I use it to add several drop shadows to my text. Here are my settings. First, I'll add a color overlay effect that will have a slightly richer gold tone, FFD220. Now that's done, I can finish it off with some drop shadows. Here are my settings. The blend mode is set to normal, so because of that, I'll drop my opacity to 10%. Considering my color scheme, I'll stay away from pure black. Instead, I'll go with a brown color, 905F09. For the distance, let's do 5 pixels for this first one and 10 pixels for the size. This is where we'll play around with the next ones. So let's add 2 more by clicking on this plus icon. Okay, so the first one from my stack can be left as is, with 5 and 10 as my values. For the second one, I'll add 5 to those numbers, so that means 10 pixels for the distance and 15 for the size. The third one will be 20 and 25, but I'll increase my opacity to 20% for a stronger look. And that does it. That's how you create a golden 3D text by using layer styles and a bit of nudging. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture and that you've followed my instructions. Now it's the time where you step back and observe your result. If you see anything that can be further improved, try and play around with all those settings we just put in. Change the blending modes, the slider values, and so on. After you're done, post the before and after shot in the comments section, where the initial one is a perfect replica of what we created together and the other one is your version. Have fun with it!